I'm really grateful to see such an incredible turnout for our talk tonight about the power of somatics for racial justice. I'm Rebekah Delsol. I'm the Director of Strategy at Healing Justice London, and we have an incredible panel tonight that I'm excited to introduce and to speak with. I have a panel of really incredible human beings that I'm so honoured to be chairing tonight, and so I will introduce you to them. I just wanted to repeat that we're here in a space to learn together. None of us are experts, we're all on a journey, with the exception of Nkem, who's the most incredible pioneering leader and teacher in this area. But I certainly come new to somatics with lots of questions and curiosity and some healthy skepticism, but also with a feeling of just deep gratitude to be practicing amongst incredible teachers and colleagues. And it's allowing me to tap into my body, to feel more present, more joyful and more loving. And we've selected people to be on the panel tonight that are also on this journey with us. So we're working in partnership with Lumus Transforms, and our team is studying with Nkem. And Melz, Temi, Alex and I are all part of an embodied leadership movement medicine program that we're running, which is working collectively to use somatics and political education. So now let me introduce the panel. My fabulous colleague, Alex Augustin, is a member of the core team at HJL, where he works on communications and the Reimagining Masculinities program. Through his experience of interdependence and struggle growing up in Brent in northwest London, he has always had an awareness of injustice and inequality. Alex writes and has held discussions about the psychological and emotional impact of structural harms in the ends, and was part of the creative team behind BAO, a mental health club for Black communities, which launched in October 2021 in partnership with Mind, Best Beginnings, the Embelly Initiative and Young Minds. During his time working at the Embelly Initiative, he got into a range of community and movement work. Next, we have Temi Mwale, who is a racial justice campaigner who is committed to dismantling the prison industrial complex and building approaches that address conflict and harm that prioritize healing and center empowerment. She is the founder of the Brunt project, a member-led youth organization that exists to serve young people who have experienced trauma, violence, and racial injustice by fighting for their rights, supporting them to heal, and empowering them to build communities where they're nurtured, protected, and respected. We also have Nkem Ndefo, who is the founder of Lumus Transforms and the creator of the Resilience Toolkit, a model that promotes embodied self-awareness and self-regulation in an ecologically sensitive framework and social justice context. She brings an abundance of experience as a clinician, educator, researcher, and community strategist to innovative programs that address trauma and inequality, build resilience, and shape liberatory change for individuals and organizations throughout the US and internationally. She's particularly interested in working alongside people that are most impacted by violence and marginalization. And last but not least, we've got Melz Owusu, who's a doctoral researcher at the University of Cambridge, a forthcoming author, and the founder of the Free Black University. Melz is interested in questions of knowledge and justice, how we connect the two to build more beautiful futures. They are inspired by spiritual belief systems from across the world and how these shed lights on how to approach problems of today on a foundation of connectedness, embodiedness, and love. So having introduced the panel, we're going to start today by having some framing around the issues and the terms, and then we'll talk a bit about people's experiences and definitely make sure we have time at the end for questions. So as we're going through, please feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat. And I'm going to ask to start with Nkem to open the space to us and really give us the framing and an introduction to somatics. What is somatics and why do we need it?
Can I just pause and we can actually live a little bit of it? I'd like to guide us into a connecting practice here together before I start talking and answering your question, if that'll be okay. Because number one, this is an experiential journey we're on. So everything that I'm about to say is invitational. meaning that this is not about command and control. This is about you reaching into yourself and anchoring what feels good and what feels not good, and stopping anything that is making you feel not good, right? Or in that direction, worse than your baseline. And so what I would like to do is just invite folks to just notice, what does your stress feel like in your body? Where is there tension, right? Where is there, things are sped up, hurried, where there's pressure, where there might be disconnection or numbness. And just noticing that. Right? And then thinking about what you're feeling right now. Is that useful in this moment, in this space where we're about to talk and connect and experience together? Or perhaps you're carrying a little much. So if you're carrying a little much and you'd like to let a little go, I'm going to invite you to just observe your breath. Whether you're breathing through your mouth or nose, doesn't matter. Just observing your breath. And again, if this doesn't feel good to you, stop and do something different. That does. I'm going to take advantage of a little quirk in the human body that in general, when we breathe out, it slows our heart rate a little. So the next time you exhale, just lengthen it slightly. Still an easy and relaxed breath as possible. Just slightly longer exhale than inhale. And as you do that, notice what might be shifting or changing in your internal landscape. Is there a little less pressure? A little bit more spaciousness? A little bit more ease? Welcome again. So at any point, as we're going through, some of this conversation, as Rebekah had said, might be hard, that we can return. If that worked for you, you can return to that settling breath to help you connect more deeply to yourself, to be more connectable to the ideas and the people here in this space. All right, Rebekah, your question. Want to do it again?
Yeah, that was lovely. Thank you for bringing us back. I was just going to ask you, what is somatics and why do we need it?
I mean, it's kind of like a funny, not funny, ha question. Like somatics is our bodies. And literally the question is, why do we need our bodies? Right? Like when we think about what has happened through colonization, through the split between the mind and the body, the disconnection between thought and feeling, right? Is that we've prioritized the cognitive, the thought, the rational, and separated it as if you can separate it from the body and the feeling and the experience. We value one more than the other. And so to me, it's actually even a bit of like, it almost doesn't make sense once you see it this way, is why do we even need a somatics, right? A somatics is really asking us to bring the body back into connection. That we are human beings, we are whole human beings, and we have experiences in our bodies that are instructive, that are valuable, and that they've been left out. And so I think of somatics as a return to wholeness. It's a return to wholeness and to connect to what is the wisdom of our bodies, the wisdom of our experience, and how can that inform us to be more connected as we move forward, as we are, as we vision a world. There's a new world. There's so much that we drag along with that is unexamined, and the overemphasis on the thought is just one of those things that we're dragging with. So I think of somatics as a return to wholeness, and a way to decolonize some of our basic, so much that we do is informed by just the cognitive lens. And so when we bring the body, it's like a whole nother arena opens up on everything that we're touching, doing, and experiencing, alone, together, collectively. Does that feel about right?
And how do we do somatics? We had an initial practice that was us coming into our bodies and calming. For people that haven't experienced it before, and this is the first time they're hearing the language or doing the practice, how would we describe the practice of somatics?
I mean, this is nothing new. There's so many things people probably already are doing, but they're not officially in the bucket of somatics. What are the ways that we connect to our body, right? It can be something as simply when we're bathing ourselves and you're feeling your body and you're like, I'm here, right? Little activities that we do that people don't even realize about how we connect to our bodies. We just might go, we might take a deep breath. Little things like people who crack their knuckles, right? How many people here have a habit of cracking their knuckles, right? Literally what you're doing is activating a sensor in your joints that helps your brain know where your body is in space. It's deeply settling. So you're practicing somatics without knowing it. You'll see children who will rock, right? You'll just see them. And they kind of wiggle and they do different things. And we tell them, sit still, stop that, right? They are feeling activation in their body, maybe unsure about something, maybe some fear. And what are they doing? They're regulating that. They're using their bodies. So there's so many ways, people through dance, right? When you have a feeling, you're like, oh, I feel a little stiff, let me stretch. You're using somatics. So I don't think we need to make this precious. This is a part of being human that we discount because we're so about what is the action? What am I thinking? What is the idea? Versus what is the being, right? What else is here? And so there are many practices that are, I think more officially in the camp of somatics, where we have made more of the theory, more of the science to justify our humanity. But because we've been so disconnected from our bodies, actually, even the thought of me as an expert, I think is just it's ludicrous. I think of myself more as helping people remember what the capacities of the body are. So I'm also trained as in the US, midwives were nurses as well. I know in the UK it's different, but I'm a nurse and a midwife. And I, would always think about helping after birth, helping birthing people breastfeed or chest feed. If you think about any other mammal, do they have a whole specialist, a whole special category of profession to feed the young? It's ludicrous. So imagining a dog or a pig or a horse going to a specialist to feed their young, it is instinctive because there's a deep connection to the body. And here we've rarefied so many things that we need specialists. We need specialists to know how our bodies work again. So how do we socialize the ideas, remember together, and perhaps, this is recovering and rebuilding, and we might even build new knowledge based on what we've recovered.
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder not to be precious to this, but actually we're doing a lot of somatics every day and finding ways to connect. I'm going to bring some of the other team in and ask them how they came to somatics. What's their journey been like? So can we start with Temi?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's really lovely to see so many people here. And yeah, really excited to have this conversation with everyone. So for me, my journey to somatics, as you've said, Nkem, there's the stuff that we were doing before is being labeled in that way. And I think it starts with the awareness of actually, I'm already practicing some of these things, maybe instinctively or working on these things, but it's the labeling part, the awareness. But yeah, earlier last year, Healing Justice London had a really amazing embodied leadership program. And there were maybe 30 of us who went there, and we really collectively, we practiced together. We went through a learning journey, which was very much experiential as well. And yeah, it allowed us to reflect on this for what for many of us felt like quite a new world, at the same time an old world, like remembering, as you said, Nkem, like coming back to something that feels quite innate and yeah, grounding for us all. But what I really valued so much from that space was the practices and the knowledge that this isn't it's a journey, and the journey is about that daily practice. How do you reconnect with the body, and how can that support the work that we're doing? How can we even do the work from a place of disconnection? I think many of us were asking, and we were all actually working on a lot of different issues. Racial justice, some of us were focused on that, but there were people who were working on disability justice and working on education rise. There were people who were working from more creative spaces. There were so many different kind of focuses, but I think that was really valuable, us all being in the room with all of these different lenses, but arriving at the same place, which is that this is something that connects us all, and that's necessary for all of the change that we want to see in the world, to be, I would say, linked with that integrity, which is that there are a lot of things that we want to change, a lot of systems that we want to change, a lot of society that needs to change. At the same time, how do we have integrity in our own daily lives, and how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to each other? And when we're talking about, I guess there's the humanizing, rehumanizing in a world that really dehumanizes us, to be disconnected from our own bodies. We, practice a sense of dehumanizing ourselves, but we're taught to do that. We're socialized to do that in this society. So it was a really, really powerful and transformative experience. I think I can speak for everyone who did it, and we've had some spaces to continue practicing as a collective. But there was the interdependence element, the mutual connection. And one of my main takeaways was really about the making of a declaration. And it really shifted my view from essentially seeing myself as somebody having commitments, whether that's towards racial justice or to particular changes that I want to see in society, to being the commitment myself, which means everything I do, everything I am is in service of those declarations I make. And it doesn't have to be to do with the bigger the work. It can be personal commitments that you want to embody, and really trying to align our day-to-day practices with those changes that we want to see. And it reminds me of kind of fractals, or how Adrian would talk about fractals from emergent strategy, and the idea that this is what we do every day in our day-to-day lives. And if we can all move in that direction, that is just as valuable in terms of trying to create that systemic change that we want to see. And actually the systemic change won't happen without changing ourselves. And so I think somatics, yeah, it really gave us really helpful lens and really great tools immediately to take away and practice, which were really, really transformative and powerful.
Thanks, Temi. I'm going to go to Melz, because Melz was also on the retreat. What's been your journey?
Yeah, blessings. Thank you, Temi, my good sis Temi. I didn't just hear what you said, I felt it. And I feel like for me, that is what somatics really means, isn't it? Like, just, I experienced that in the body, and I went back to that space that we were in all those months ago, that Healing Justice put on. And one of the things that I think was incredibly important about that space was seeing each other as human, and how that allows us to give ourselves the kind of license to see ourselves as human, and as whole, complete beings with feelings, with experiences, with like just everything. And I think sometimes in movements, we forget that like the leaders are also human with like imperfections, with pain, with insecurities. And I feel like being in that space and moving from like, I'm this person on the outside, but being allowed to and being given the permission to almost like break down and just allow myself to be held. And I think that, yeah, being able to engage in the process and understanding somatics in that way was just profound. But I think the first place that I came to somatics was actually, I guess, ironically, through the mind. And the place that I guess I always feel safe is in academia. I love learning, I love reading, like that's my thing. And the kind of Cartesian split is what it's often called, like Descartes, we're just a mind and we're a body. It's something that I research a lot. And Black feminists such as Patricia Hill Collins, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde have brought the feeling into this kind of mind-body dualistic split and allowed us to see ourselves not just as a separate mind and body, but also as feeling things and thinking about how do we bring feeling, how do we bring the soul, how do we bring the self, how do we bring love into the research process. And so for me, that was ironically my route into it. But through learning that, I was like, one sec, the penny dropped and I was like, I can't just do this intellectually because then I'm not doing it at all. And so being able to engage in spaces like Healing Justice and being able to be around people that are doing this kind of work in such an embodied way has taught me how to move back into my body. And just learning about spiritual practices as well, like meditation, like prayer, just being at breath work and so on, and being able to recognize that I'm safe in this body and I don't have to run out there, I don't have to run over there. Like coming back here is actually a safe space. And just before I finish up, one of the things that I was reflecting on as well, like, is as like a trans person, I haven't always felt that my body is like a safe space or my body is a space that I want to acknowledge. But through being able to, of course, like transition in and of itself, kind of opened up a space where I was like, okay, this body can move physically in a way that I want it to. It can transform. And being able to reconnect with my body as it's transformed and as it's grown into the person that I know myself to be has allowed a gateway for somatics to kind of open up. So, yeah.
Thanks, Melz. Alex. I know Alex sadly was ill, so you weren't on the retreat last year, and we missed you very much. But how have you journeyed towards somatics?
Hey, I just want to say, first of all, I'm so honored to be here. And I'm so excited to see so many people on this call. And I also just want to say, hold me, guys, because I'm quite new to talking like this. So please sort of like give me grace. So how I came to somatics, something Fazana Khan, the exec at Healing Justice, said was that she's a recovering dissociator, and I want to echo that because I had a lot of dissociative tendencies, and I obviously, as all of us on the call will have as well. I've got trauma to recover and heal from, and I realized that things had to change. And it's been a non-linear journey of getting into my body, noticing sensations. But I will also say, as some of us have said on the call as well, that I understood an innate sacredness of the body, sort of inherently, of the body, of the being, of the self, beyond the thinking mind, and as a wisdom that's always in us. And so I've come to a place through kind of practicing, through learning with the HJL team, with Stacey Haynes, Nkem, Fazana, Rebekah, all of us, all of the people that I've come into contact with and practice with sort of over the past few months and years, that, you know, it's okay to weep. It's okay to shake things out. It's okay to sigh. It's okay to get tactile with myself, to dance, stretch, fidget. And I've gained like knowledge of what these things offer. My most regular body practice, I would say, is Muay Thai. So I practice Muay Thai, which is a Thai martial art, which I think offers confidence in your body, stability. You have to be mindful of the rhythm of your body, of your pace. And I also just wanted to big up my therapist because he is also a breathwork coach. And there's some things that through regular sessions with my therapist, I've sort of connected with the breath. But I just wanted to also, talking about this, I wanted to sort of locate these practices within my experiences. And it has certainly been a difficult journey returning to my body. There's been times when it's felt like retreading of the same ground, reminding myself I'm safe, you know, when my nervous system doesn't feel that way. And, you know, it's been a process of feeling through these concepts and gaining more understanding and understanding of the non-Eurocentric lineage of these practices, doing them in community, doing them with people like the team, Nkem, and understanding as well, for me, one thing that's been important has been understanding that there's nothing wrong with your body having needs and with vulnerability. And that's something that's inherent to having a body and to being human. And one other thing that I just wanted to talk about here to locate, again, these experiences and this learning about somatics has been, it's just to point to, which a lot of us will have already said and will have alluded to, sort of the conditions that affect our ability to heal and to engage with these things. And, you know, I want to name patriarchy, racism, colonialism, capitalism, some of the things that I feel made me believe that it wasn't for me to know my body. You know, I grew up, as Rebekah very kindly mentioned in the intro, I grew up in Brent, in Northwest London. I grew up in Ends. And there were experiences there of hyper-policing, of surveillance, of symbolic violence, of material deprivation, dehumanization, interpersonal violence. So I just want to name those as well. Something that Fazana very kindly kind of pointed out to me when I went through what I was going to talk about this, that, you know, Black masculinity as well, and being most likely to be sectioned, but least likely to be believed experiencing pain. And I also just want to kind of name the kids that are excluded from school, people on benefits, incarcerated folks. I kind of want to speak to those experiences because I think when you have certain experiences, there's a where you're supposed to end up. And I don't want to play into like myth making around that, because people don't always end up there, right? But just to say that, you know, when people don't get access to therapy, that diminishes, you know, when people don't have access to therapy, like that diminishes your ability to recover. if we don't have the right support systems, that diminishes your ability to recover. And we have a society that is designed around these myths and these things, and we need the tools to be able to navigate it. So just to say as well, those are the conditions that we need to hold. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll pass back to Rebekah.
Thank you, Alex. There's certainly some lovely comments in the chat, people holding you, but also really feeling what you've described, and it's resonating with many. So thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. For me, I think one of the things that excites me about somatics is the mixing of both the individual healing, but also moving to collective healing, and the notion of politicized somatics, that we can't have any change unless we heal together. And that connection between the self and the wider community. Nkem, I was going to ask you about politicized somatics and how we move from the individual to the collective, and think about the impacts that somatics can have on racial justice work.
Yes, and just to humanize me about my own route, how I got here. How did I get to somatics? If I could just answer that question a little bit. As a survivor of significant childhood trauma, but working and organizing from when I was a teen, it was always in motion, but no feeling, right? Always in motion. But what I was trying to do is outrun a sense of helplessness and powerlessness. And I just want to call this in, because I'll link it back in my own story to your question about the politicization. It is a defining feature of trauma to feel out of control, overwhelmed, powerless, and helpless. It is a defining feature, regardless of the nature or type of trauma. This is the case. And so many of us are carrying trauma that is more or less healed, usually less healed, because we don't have safer spaces and supports to do the healing work. And so for myself, this was similar. Without that, I was trying to have impact. I was trying to feel power in making change, to relieve suffering, right? And in essence, I was outrunning my own sense of powerlessness. And when that is my motivation, I was pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. It is not sustainable, because I couldn't tolerate the feeling of feeling helpless or powerless, because it took me back to my particular trauma was individually, but also collectively as a Black presenting woman in the United States. And so for me, when it became unsustainable anymore, I had to face, there's trauma here. And it was so, to drop into my body was absolutely terror. So I'm damned if I'm doing, I'm damned if I don't. If I'm out of my body and I'm pushing, it's not sustainable. And I did not have the skills with which to tolerate the terror to exist in my body. And so I had to learn that. Fits and starts in different ways to be able to tolerate slowly over years coming back into my body. I am 52 years old, and I can say that the safety I feel now is more than I have felt my entire life. It wasn't until really my mid-40s where I was like, is this the safety thing people were talking about? Oh, this is it? Right? And so how could I possibly envision a safe and free world if I don't even know what that experience is inside of myself? My vision will be constrained by the limits of my experience. So I can kind of imagine it, right? But if I can feel it and be it, this is the fractal that Temi was speaking of, the embodiment, then that was the ability to really, the vision, the creative generation, and my capacity to be connected to people in a non-defensive way, which is we're not getting free by ourselves, we're getting free together. And so if I can't have this space in myself, I don't know how I'm going to connect, right, with my co-conspirators, with my comrades, right, with my siblings, if I can't do that? So by nature, this is politicized, and there is a huge wellness industry where it's the neoliberal co-optation of, like, it just loves to co-opt everything and atomize it and just be, it's mainly asking people to use these same somatic tools, right? But for the purpose to be more effective cogs in the machine, for the purpose of being more individual. This is me, my boundaries, me. And actually, I think it weakens people's ability to tolerate discomfort, because safety and discomfort are two different things. And so for myself, becoming, choosing somatics was actually just a very practical, like, this is what's needed to get through. If this is what's needed for the world that I want to envision, then this is what I do. And so my healing was bound up in the political. And so the necessary politicization of somatics, pulling it back from the neoliberal conception of individual wellness, bubble bath, self-care. Yeah. Knowing, one of the keys is knowing when it's safe enough to rest and resting effectively. How are you using your tools? What does recovery look like? So you can, not just like live to fight another day, live first, but to experience joy, to experience pleasure, to experience in a prefigurative way the world that we want to build. And we can't do that just in our heads, because in fact, the stress and trauma will hijack you, whether you like it or not. The power of the body's ability to say, like, I'm going to keep you safe and I'm going to shut you down, make you be rigid, make you defensive, all of the things that are not compatible with the work that we have here to do, the work and the play we have in front of us and around us. So there you go. There's a little bit for you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to come in on that? I was struck by how can you have a vision of what a safe and free world looks like if we don't have it in our bodies? And that sounds like a lot of the work that many people on this call are doing. Temi, Alex, anyone want to build on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think it really, really resonated. I'm just nodding the whole time. Another piece of the puzzle that we did at the retreat was looking at those core human needs, which I think really ties in with what you just said. So dignity, safety, belonging, this is what we all need. And yet, how many of us can say that we've experienced that? And in the context of what we're speaking about today, racism directly impacts our safety. It makes us unsafe. It makes us live in society that has systems that harm us, that inflict harm and trauma on us, and that's not safe. And it also takes away our dignity. We are not treated oftentimes as human beings, and that is dehumanizing, which means you can't have dignity. And the sense of belonging, I mean, being in a country that it feels like doesn't want you to be there, and actively makes it known it doesn't want you to be there, that also has effect on the sense of belonging. So even though we create community in the ways that we can, our communities are also impacted by those same systems. So collectively, there is so much like trauma that we experience at individual level, but it's also at a collective level. And I think with that in mind, I mean, I really loved everything that Alex said as well. And one thing that struck me when you were speaking, Alex, was about the kind of experiences that we have in the community and the support or lack of support that is there. There's no infrastructure. But something that I think about often is, what does that infrastructure look like? This country is not equipped. It's more than just therapy, because I can see we could campaign for that. Let's have therapies for everybody that's been impacted by these things, but who are the therapists going to be? What are they going to be? What kind of space are they going to be holding? Oftentimes, these are very, the same systems that are inflicting a lot of harm as well. And with that in mind, the way that we feel when we make space to be in touch with the things that we need through practicing, through these practices, not individually, but collectively, I think it gives us more imagination of the world that we want to build. Because as you said, Nkem, it's hard to vision that when you don't have those experiences. And so back to the retreat, some of the things that were really powerful was, having an experience of what collective care could look like. And through some of the practices we did, was the first time in a long time in that way that I had genuinely felt held, coming to that space, carrying everything, not just the personal experiences, the collective experiences, but then adding on top of that, like the responsibility of doing the work and what comes with that, what comes with holding others as well. And I think the retreat was very much focused on the leadership, in the sense of what do we need to have that embodied leadership? I mean, in the loose sense that everybody takes on responsibility and everyone takes on leadership roles in different ways. And so how can we also be held when we take on those responsibilities? And that was a really transformative experience for me personally, because feeling safe enough in that environment to actually let go and be held, actually let myself be held. It connects to what you were saying before, Nkem, about how does it feel when you go into that place if it's not familiar? And it's not easy. It was very, very challenging, but it was also extremely transformative and gave me a lot of imagination then about the kind of infrastructure that is needed and that could really support us doing the work that we are doing and that we need to continue to do. But without that, in absence of that support, collective care, community care, those practices, the infrastructure that enables those practices, it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. We will not be able to win. And I think we can win, but we have to make sure we're doing it with longevity. And so this was really powerful at resourcing us and giving us ideas about what resourcing could look like. And as I said, incredibly transformative.
Melz?
Yeah, I was about to jump in as well. Thank you for everything that all the panelists have said so far. And again, going back to that retreat, I feel like what I learned there was that sometimes when through the lesson of listening to my body, that it may take me away from the kind of work that I do in the activist world. And I feel like over the past, I guess, decade of my life, I've just been following what I'm passionate about and doing the things that I feel like need to change in the world. But within that, because I haven't been connected to my body, I haven't known where my boundaries are. I haven't known how to manage my energy. I haven't known when to say no. I haven't known how to protect myself from attacks or projections and so on. And what moving into my body said to me is to pause. And I think that there's so much power in like the interdependence that can be within these movements, and not even in a necessarily like very like logical kind of capitalist hierarchical kind of way, just in the almost in the fabric of just living alongside like other incredible people doing incredible work. Like things don't have to be linear. They can be so illinear. They can be so scattered. They can be so like chaotic, but there's something really beautiful in chaos and in trusting that if one person steps back, many will step forward, innit? And sometimes it can feel like the weight of the world is on your back and like so many people are relying on you. But when the body says pause, it's something to truly trust. And I feel like it's being able to honor that feeling alongside honoring the kind of mental processes that one has to go through, and to understand how to kind of balance like your passion and your purpose and so on with how you engage in the most meaningful and loving way of yourself as well, because I feel like that's what somatics as well is teaching me. Like, yo, Melz, like, you deserve to be loved, you know, like, and there's no one else that you need to look for to do that. You need to love yourself first, innit? And what is the most loving thing you can do for yourself right now in this life? Is to pause, is to really pause and to just take time with myself and just love on myself so that I have the love to give to others, and so that I can pour love in at another stage in life to the things that I'm passionate about. But nothing comes from that empty space. So yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Melz. And there's lots of lovely comments in the chat saying just to honour that feeling and to pause, and recognition of how much we all need to pause. Sorry, I saw you were going to jump in, Alex.
Yeah, I think I have a few thoughts that maybe follow well from what Melz is calling us into there. I mean, so I had thought about like sort of the question of how somatics connects to racial justice. And I was thinking about some of this stuff of like those of us in the work being also continuously hurt and re-traumatized potentially through doing the work, and also still being in the conditions, experiencing racism, like that doesn't stop, right? And so with this harm that happens, you know, we've already talked about this, but like there are so many things that when we allow ourselves to reset from these experiences, like trauma has happened, but now it's not happening. So we can bring ourselves to settling, because if we don't do that, that can make it difficult for us to experience love. Some of the experience that I've had is it harmed, like some of my traumas harmed my ability to have trust in myself, trust in the future, my ability to carry on, to feel like I can carry on when my body feels like it's continuously betraying me. So when we're healing as people within movements, we can understand those bodily responses. I'm not broken. My body is trying to keep me safe, and I'm out of that and I'm safe now, and so I can react in a different way. And some of my, like, so Stacey Haynes, who I wasn't at the retreat with, but I've learned so much from, calls us into, so says to us that somatics starts with, what do you long for? And when I was reflecting on that, I was thinking about when I was in my earlier life and I was experiencing trauma and I was angry, and I'm still angry. But there's more than one thing that you can do with that passion and anger. And in knowing it and knowing who we are and knowing where we are, and knowing that we have multiple choices, but also to hold that sometimes those choices are very restricted and impaired. But having that ability to modulate and move from experience to experience, having the appropriate response, is a way of us building trust in ourselves and trust in our futures, and being able to move from love and have love within us. Because we haven't always had to survive things, or some of us at least like have had moments of like freedom, love, and capaciousness that we felt within our bodies. For me, it's memories of like young childhood. And, you know, those embodied memories, like if we can return to that place, it lets us know that it's real and tangible to move from a place of love. Like it's not a utopian idea. And to me, that has revolutionary power, because it can make that intangible thing tangible. It can give us a way of knowing what that is, the wholeness and aliveness that is within us. Yeah.
I want to follow on from what Alex was saying. And as hurt and harmed people, we often reproduce much of what is done to us in some of the spaces that we're working, you know, and we see so much rupture and conflict in our movements, and that we're constantly breaking down. Can you speak to how we would navigate conflict and harm for social justice and our movements? I don't know if anyone wants to start to speak to that. How do we navigate conflict?
I mean, a big part of conflict, to be able to navigate conflict, is to be able to feel our feelings and not necessarily act on our feelings, right? To have enough spaciousness within us that we can hear one another and hear and hold the complexity. Conflict is complex, right? There are often many right stories. There are many viewpoints. How do we hold that complexity? So a few things happen when we become activated into stress or even into trauma. What happens is we lose the capacity, our hearing actually changes, and we lose our capacity to hear the range of the human voice as well. We listen instead for low and danger sounds in the environment. So even to hear one another physiologically, it is imperative for any of us entering into any relational space, let alone a conflict resolution space, with settling the skills to settle our systems so that we can actually truly hear. So I think that is foundational. And so when I mediate conflict, is one of the first things is, you know, this is often, we may even need to do caucus work, right? Because you might not feel safe enough in a group or in a setting with somebody where there is harm has happened. So you may need to caucus separately and make sure that you've built some of this capacity to stay more settled within yourself. You may need someone to hold that space who has that capacity to notice when people are activating and guide them back into settling so that we can stay in this open hearing space. But just think about what happens when you're stressed, right? Our posture changes, we cross our arms, we lean back, we steel our jaw, right? We lose the capacity for nuanced thought, for being able to see things on different sides. And we go from a sense of connection with all and oneness as we rise in our stress and into trauma. It's just about my people, right? My very close people, me. We become, I call it almost, it's a narcissism, and it's not true narcissism. It's just a normal stress activation that the more stressed we are, who we consider in our group gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. The last thing I want to say is I often use this concept about the zone of willingness. That wherever I am, right, I have a zone of my preferences and who I am from all of my identities, my personhood, whatever that is. I have a willingness to extend into the zone of willingness, right, to meet other people. If these other people that I am with, I feel seen, I feel valued, my zone of willingness is quite large. So it may not be my preference, but I'm willing to extend into that zone. And in that zone, we can actually find compromise. We can find solutions. We can find that collective, right? That collective space. But if I am not seen, if I feel harmed, if I feel unsafe, my zone of willingness becomes very small and everyone is in their corner. And so it's, one, it will produce more conflict and it's almost impossible to resolve conflict. And instead, what you see is somebody wins and somebody submits. This is not true conflict resolution. This is a replication of harm. And so how we need to be able to have the individual and collective skills to settle our systems so that we can hear one another, so we can witness one another, which allows us to extend our zone of willingness into that space, that common space where we can find solutions. So I don't know how conflict resolution truly happens without somatics. What usually happens when there's no somatics, again, is somebody wins and somebody loses. And the person who loses holds that inside their body, even if they say, everything's fine, I see how logical that is. And that thing in the body will rise up later and start sneaking out in your behavior, right? And more harm, and the cycle of harm continues.
See lots of nodding. Does anyone want to build on that?
I'll just briefly add something. I think that was a really beautiful reflection. And I feel like many of us, I am still learning. Like, I have no idea. It's harm and conflict is so complex. But I think one of the things that I've learned is about how we start our relationships. And so whilst at the messy point of like the conflict, I think everything that Nkem said was just so like beautiful. But for my own life, I've been thinking more about how I enter how I connect with people. And so much of that, I don't think often starts from a whole place. And I don't feel like potentially I don't see the other person as their whole being. And I don't feel that I've often been seen as my whole being, as opposed to, I think, what Adrienne Marie Bowers calls like a movement rock star. Do you know what I mean? And so you're just often like put on a pedestal. And so as soon as something something to someone else's distaste happens, it's like it's very easy to engage that kind of dehumanizing of both ourselves and of each other. And so I'm really interested at this stage of my life in coming into relation with people that I'm in connectedness in any form from like the fullest space. And how can I see you as the fullest human like you can possibly be, with all of your insecurities, all of your shame, all of your complexities, all of your pain, and be able to embrace that? And how can you also see me as that?
That's like resonated with many people. I want to ask now about the value of somatics in the spaces that you're working. And this feeds into some of the questions that have been asked about how do we practically bring somatics into the organisations or the spaces that we're working on. Temi, would you like to talk about the work that you do? I know you're already embracing and thinking about embodiment and somatics.
Sure. How do we bring it in? That is the question, because once you become aware of all the different kinds of practices and you realize that actually it's not a training, it's not a program, it's everyday practice about creating spaces for people to come into that awareness and be able to practice, and having that be part of the essence of the work, and not an add-on or a side part of it, like fundamental, crucial, a core element to what we do. I feel that it's a longer journey, and it is because there is still, I think somebody said it earlier, but our culture is around, we have a dehumanizing culture. The systems that we create often model the systems that we want to change, because it's hard to imagine from a place of unknowingness. So I'll start by saying that. But I think in terms of working in the community with young people who have experienced and continue to experience significant harm, I see so much potential and necessity for somatics. We're working with young people who may have, experienced serious violence, not just in the community at the hands of other young people, but also by the state, by the police, by the prison system, and so as well as other systems that come into contact with them. There's so much there, but the struggle is that it's not something that happened in the past, that now we have space and spaciousness to attend to and heal, is something that's continuous and ongoing. And so how do we utilize somatics with that context, that actually is about building the capacity and the resources of us as individuals and a collective to respond to the things that have happened historically, but also the things that continue to happen, and the things that we're anxious and fearful and, afraid will continue to happen whilst these systems are operating in the way that they do. And so I think it's about having those spaces where we can practice and being able to introduce people to that. Grounding is something that we can do in different spaces, whether that's with a young person in a police station or at a court, in a court building, or in a hospital room. Like, these are all spaces in which there is, harm that is there and that is present, and being able to just create a space to practice, even in those spaces that are harmful, I think can be really powerful, because it builds connection in places that are designed to disconnect and that are designed to dehumanize and take away dignity, and generally are not safe places. And so I think with that, there's so much that we can do, but at the same time, who is going to do it? And I feel that there's a lot more that we need to build in terms of our capacity to teach, to hold the space, and not just for ourselves, but how do we build the community capacity? I'm really mindful of that. It's not just about, most of the work that Forefront does is with young people directly, but I'm thinking broader. How do we, empower the family members to be able to practice these things? How do we empower the other environments where young people find themselves, so that this isn't just something that's happening in one, unique space that's special? It has to be shared so that it can continue. But for now, that's bigger thinking. But for now, I think if there's anywhere where we can have sustained practice at a community level and introduce young people that have experienced significant harm to some small practices, things that they can do, is also about action. And I think action can be really powerful, because it's what you were speaking about, Nkem, before, trauma and powerlessness and helplessness. So being able to have a tool that someone can do that actually supports them to self-regulate, to come home to who they are. And experiences of violence often take that away and disconnect you from who you are, because often your physical, the sanctity of your physical has been violated. And so it's really hard to then reconnect with that, especially when that is something that's still fresh. And so lots of thoughts that I have, but what I'm left with is, I think is necessary, especially for people that have experienced that type of harm. I think it will be so powerful if it can be a shared language and a shared practice that we can build.
So I'd like to add on there some caveats. Yes, having done this work in all different, running programs for refugee torture survivors, teaching in schools, teaching teachers to teach in schools, in healthcare clinics, in community with organizers, that yes, this is something that needs to be socialized. It needs to be community-based, and there also needs to be some knowledge that's imparted around it, because I see actually people with a little bit of knowledge doing harm, and they don't realize they're doing harm. So I'll see, for example, somebody's like, they learned, if you notice, like I started with a breathing practice. So someone learns breathing is great. And they come in and then they say, we're going to do breathing, but they're still using the controlling language, right, of the culture. So you'll hear, close your eyes, breathe and count to this. And so, right, what if somebody right now is having a traumatic reaction to that? The person who's holding that doesn't know how to hold it in a trauma-informed way that includes or promotes and fosters self-agency and choice. And I see it really commonly, because some of the higher trauma responses actually look very calm. We look very disconnected. So I've seen this, for example, with teachers. Well, they'll pull this into a classroom and they realize, they tell everyone to close their eyes, it might not be safe for someone to close their eyes. And so a kid could shut down and look very calm, but actually be in the highest trauma activation and dissociation. So we need to also share the practices, but also the knowledge of how do stress and trauma show up, how to foster self-agency and choice, so that people can use these practices where they are. I think there is an overemphasis on practices and less an emphasis on the approach to understand, how do you know something works for you? How do you not know if it's making you worse? Because many times, many of these practices are extracted, just the way neoliberalism loves to, extracts them from Buddhism. Okay, it deracinates, cuts off the roots, pulls the practices of breathing, of mindfulness away from community, the Sangha, pulls it away from the sacred texts, pulls it away from the teachers, puts it on apps. And it's just like, oh, we're going to do this mindfulness. We're going to turn inwards. And like I said, for myself, having significant trauma, when I was asked to ground and turn inwards in spaces with people who didn't know about trauma, it traumatized me terribly because it was terrifying to drop in. I needed somebody who understood that those of us with high trauma loads need to be guided gently into the embodiment. So this is it is a reclamation of knowledge. It is a democratization of these practices. And it's also the spreading, right, of the knowledge of how trauma shows up and how to safely embody, which may take a lot of time. And so I just want to tell, like, I was working with some youth that had been involved in community violence in the US, lots of gangs shot at, incarcerated, this type of thing. And I was leading a practice with choice. And this one young man says, I don't want to do that. And I said, great, because often youth are not allowed to say no. You knew you didn't want to do that practice. Good for you. And he looked like, what? So here is, we think the practice is the most important thing. It was actually the permission to anchor into himself and choose what he wanted to do. So then he knew he had choice. He's like, well, then maybe I'll do it. And he did the practice, right? And the practice I was teaching is called the therapeutic tremor, which activates the mammalian reflex that exists in all mammals to reset stress and trauma. So I was teaching this, and he actually just fell asleep, and he was snoring very loudly, is how I knew he was asleep. So he wasn't even doing the practice. But when we circled back, it was maybe 20 youth, they were sharing. And what he said was, he goes, I don't usually sleep, actually, maybe 2 hours a night, because he lives with community violence, gun violence. It is the United States. We have so much gun violence. And he goes, I don't usually sleep, but I slept and I feel great. And it was like only like 10 minutes or something. And he says, and I dreamt that I was in the mountains and it was so beautiful. He had never been to the mountains. So he didn't even do the practice, but he was in a community that allowed him to normalize his experience of trauma and to have choice about how he moved. So sometimes those end up being the most important somatic lessons. And he was able to access safety within himself and a vision of mountains. You know, so yes to everything you said, Temi. And how do we share this knowledge so that people can use somatics safely and not re-traumatize? Because there's a lot of, you know, a little knowledge can be dangerous. Like what's enough that people can practice and move quickly and safely, slowly when you need to.
Nkem, would you mind just building on that and telling us a bit more about the resilience toolkit? There's lots of questions in the chat about practically how do we do this and how do we do it in organizations?
The reason why I made the resilience toolkit, and it's a really kind of a bland name, it's on purpose. It's a Trojan horse because it can get into spaces where people say, oh yeah, this is right. Because the point of it is what I realized is that trauma is one of our root problems. Racialized trauma, all trauma is one of our root problems. Traumatize people, traumatize each other, ourselves, we suffer, etc. But most people can't bridge to there. I couldn't because I couldn't even get in my body. And some people can't even say the word. So I realized we needed a bridge practice to grow our capacities, to be in our bodies, to listen to our bodies, to settle. And so the whole point is that it develops our knowledge base of what does stress and trauma and relaxation actually feel like inside. How do we grow the discernment of if it's useful or not? Because sometimes you might be in a space where you need to be on guard or appeasing. And if you know intentionally that's what you're doing, you won't shame yourself for it. You'll recognize the reaction. But when it is safer and you might be over responding, how to pick a practice and how to know it works. And I'm interested in real-time practices, not retreat practices. practices you can use in real time in 30 seconds, then know that they work. And now I'm going to cough, so someone else has to talk.
Thank you. And Nikita's just shared the link to the resilience toolkit in the chat so everyone can see it. Melz, Alex, I'm wondering if you want to build on what's been said and really think about the value of somatics in the spaces that you're working in education, in comms. How can you see somatics making a real difference in those spaces?
Yeah, I can come in here. So I'm part of Healing Justice through like the comms team. So yeah, I had to think about like, my work, and doing radical comms is like the way the challenges that we come up against are that these platforms are not made for us. We need to navigate that. When doing comms, you have to read through tragic news and reactionary social media posts. There's a lot of like being on screens and being disconnected through being on screens. And yeah, just reflecting on how that, how the somatics makes my ability to do radical comms, improves my ability to do radical comms is when I am experiencing some of those things like the screens and the, it's just that ability to come back to my body. And also being able to be curious enough, curious, trusting, loving enough to when I'm talking about difficult things, that I can phrase it in a way that it lands. Or yeah, I can be creative enough and curious enough and trusting and loving enough to know how to phrase that so that it will land. That's me on that.
Yeah.
Just now that I'm just super quick, and then I'm going to pass it to Melz. I just see people responding to the word resilience, and I want to be very, very clear. I am not talking about a resilience so that you are stronger to take more oppression. I'm talking about reclaiming resilience. And I'm going to put it in the chat, we use a term called alchemical resilience. And we talk about it's a flexible strength and increased capacity to heal, to overcome adversity, and change systems of inequity and oppression into places where we thrive. Because unfortunately, those of us with marginalized identities are tasked with the biggest job of changing this system. And we do need more resilience. We can be mad about it, but we do need it if we want to change this place. We want to transform it. So there, just a little bit. All right, Mel, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, just to add in terms of how I see it come up in my work. So part of my work is the practice of teaching. And I was actually teaching at my university earlier this week. And in one point in the lecture, I just paused and I just asked the students, how do you feel? And they looked so confused, like unbelievably confused. And everyone just kind of went quiet. And I said, okay, what's your experience of me asking this question? And they just said, no one ever asked us that question. We don't understand why, like, it's really uncomfortable that you're asking that. And so through that, I kind of went through exploring like Black feminist thought and like the role of like the teacher as someone that should be tending also to the care of like the spirits and souls of our students, not just their intellect. And so through that, we kind of went outside because Cambridge is a beautiful city, and we just went and sat by the river to do the rest of the class. And the students were just, honestly, they were just so confused, didn't it? They were, for the whole time, they were confused, but it was such a beautiful moment. And one of them came up to me afterwards and was just like, I've just never experienced something like this. Like, thank you so much for holding this space in this kind of way. And in that kind of vein, like through doing Free Black Uni as well, we similarly invite the feelings of our students into the space. And it's so wild that what are we teaching people that every time they come into this space, they literally have to leave everything at the door other than their intellect. Like, it's such a disembodying experience. And I was talking to them about what kind of people do we then become in the world? Like, what, like, people are going to be the next CEO of this, or the next person that's running this, like, whatever they go and do, like, they're going to embody this nature of disembodiment. And so even in those kind of small ways, thinking about all the different places that I can share the thing that I love to do, which is share knowledge, but also bring in that feeling self, and allowing people to recognize that their whole selves are important, because that's what the aim of it is.
Thanks, Melz. That's a beautiful story about what you're able to give to your students, and that's been reflected in the chat. I wanted to ask about joy and creativity. I think sometimes we're saturated with our pain, and we talk about how we use these practices to get beyond the pain. But what I've also found and been moved by is actually how much it opens up for me, and how much I wasn't experiencing before. And so I wanted to ask each of you to share a moment of deep embodied joy where you really felt it in the core of your stomach. And how did you know you were feeling it? What felt good? Alex, you've got a smile, so I'm going to come to you.
That's one to think about. I had a smile, but that was yeah. Maybe go to somebody else. I need a second to think about that.
Deep embodied joy. When and where do we feel that? And how do we know?
I'll jump in. So I have a friend who just had spinal surgery, and I was cooking for her. And I was chopping the vegetables and sauteing the vegetables, making her a big lentil soup. And I had some music on, and I felt so joyous to be alive, to feel. I was like, she had very serious surgery, to be able to be in the position to bring her and her children food. And the music was so beautiful, and really like this sense of care. And I like felt light in my chest. I felt just spontaneous smile and movement, just so easy and flowing. Just, ooh, delicious.
Yeah, mentioning food also took me back to, I guess, what I feel such joy, because do you know what, I feel like it's in the little things in life, because I think sometimes I would have a propensity to wait for the most extravagant thing to happen and then feel this joy that's all the way up here, but then it fizzles out, and then it's like, is it even really joy? It's just another form of dysregulation. And so like I just like, I'm a Libra rising, I like luxury. And so anything that, like, if I'm eating something good, or like if I'm just somewhere that is just beautiful, if the bed that I'm in is just comfortable, and like everything that's on the bed just feels good on my skin, like just the little luxuries of life bring me the most joy. Like, honestly, anything that's on the body that feels good, I'm there.
For me, I think the thing that came to mind first was literally, I call them belly laughs. I don't know, I have so many examples of it, but being in a group of people, and for whatever reason, something has just made everyone erupt with laughter, but it's that laughter really from the core, and it hurts. It actually hurts your belly, it hurts your cheeks. You can't stop. Sometimes people will start crying, and then you've moved beyond whatever it was initially, and now you're all just laughing at the belly laughing. And those moments always stand out to me, and even as I'm saying it, I can feel it like in my core. So that's an obvious example, but a smaller joy I feel every day. When I wake up, I come downstairs and I look at my plants. I have quite a lot of them, but I just try and pay attention to them and notice, and I always see a little new bud or just something so tiny and small. And I really admire them. And it reminds me just the capacity for growth and to flourish, like to grow. And it reminds me that I also have that. So I just take those little moments. It's just quiet, it's silent. I'm just looking at my plants, but it really fills me with joy just to know that, yeah, that's a positive change. And also that through my nourishment and nurturing of these, lives, that growth is coming from that. And I can invest the same in myself, and I can also grow and invest that in my community, and it can also grow. So it's just a beautiful way to start the day. It makes me feel very joyful.
I've got my one now. I like to dance to myself at home when I'm alone. I just like to put on music, and the other night I put on like this like super soppy, like slow jam, emotional like music, and I was just like dancing to myself in it, but like also expressing the feelings and like, you know what I mean? And it's that's for me, music and words and emotions, and like they can come through my body, it can come through just moving to it and getting into it, vibing. Yeah.
Thank you. And there's been so many comments in the chat about the little luxuries, about the joy of dancing, the joy of cooking, joy of plants and growth. And I think everyone's leaving with a lovely feeling of what joy can feel like, and particularly what joy can feel like when we have it in community with each other. I just wanted to ask everyone before we go for closing comments, what has the discussion brought up for you? What are you taking away, or where would you want conversations or things to go next? Anyone happy to start?
I don't have much, but I just want to say that this is, I've heard Nkem and Stacey and others say that this is a lifelong practice. And just to say that, yeah, this has felt so nourishing for that journey, for that sort of ongoing lifelong work, to continue to be in it, and to know that there's all of these people that, are here for this, and these amazing speakers that I've managed to be on a panel with somehow. Yeah, so I think that's my thought, and it's just been great, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, Nkem, would you like to go?
Go, Melz.
Just echoing Alex, like I'm deeply grateful as well. And similarly, like it's a lifelong journey, and I'm just grateful beyond belief to be on a journey to understand like somatics. And I'm grateful to Healing Justice for the part that you've played in like my own journey, and like for every person that's played a part in my own journey. Do you know what I mean? And it's like like Nkem was saying at the start, like there's no liberation if like we don't have that liberation like within our bodies. And like it's the most like sometimes, when you can't even bring things into words because they're so deeply felt. That's how I feel about like somatic healing, innit? Like just being in this space where the greatest form of liberation like becomes possible when you realize you can be safe in your own body. And yeah, and that you deserve so much love, and that we all deserve so much love. And so yeah, I just hope and pray that we can continue to be gentle with ourselves and gentle with each other, and just continue to extend love in every possible way. So yeah, just grateful to everyone that's been here today as well. Blessings.
I feel full. I feel excitement, like like I'm standing on the edge of something, and it's something really beautiful. Like it's about to, spring is about to. I'm in Los Angeles. We were already seeing the buds, right? The buds, that energy that we have gone deep. We've filled the sugar into our roots. Our roots are fat. they are connected, they are wide, right? And with this addition of somatics, right, the coming back, the bringing reclamation of ourselves, the pushing, the attempt to annihilate, right? This annihilative energy is so far in the distance because of how deeply our roots are, right? And then and connected, and then this sense of the energy like about to burst. And so I'm so excited because if you look at all the organizing that has happened to date, and that's happened in the greatest part from the head. What happens when individually and collectively we are rooted, right, in this way? I'm just like the generative capacity. If this is what's people have been able to generate, and then people start to feel safer in their bodies, they start to feel more free in their bodies. Like, what is possible? Like sci-fi level co-worlding. Let's do it. So excited.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It all resonates with me. I feel like a real profound hope, and the hope came at the beginning of the journey for me when, yeah, as I said, I had that experience, one of them maybe for the first time, of genuinely what does it mean to be held. And what I mean by that is we speak a lot, we know what is needed, we know we need community care, we know we need these feelings, but how does it actually feel? How can it, when it's brought into the world, when it actually flourishes and comes to fruition, what does that look like and feel like? And with that in mind, it gave that hope that actually there is a way that we can heal from all of the things that we have been through and that we are going through right now. It is possible. And I think our movements, our collectives, we just need hope, because hope is what sustains us. And we have to remember, even in what you said, Nkem, before, about when you can't imagine because it feels unknowing and it's not rooted in something you've actually experienced, the faith is what keeps us going, that maybe I don't have to experience to know that it's possible. But I feel somatics provides a portal to actually being able to have semblance of the experience of that possibility and feel it. And from that place, I'm just truly excited to see what emerges from that. And I do feel like it's all very emergent, but at the same time, that hope feels really real to me and is making me feel really joyful right now. So yeah, I feel honored to have been in this space with everyone and to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. And I can see that resonating with so many people, moving from faith to love, to the new feelings of possibilities, to some sort of change at sci-fi level, and this energy and excitement that we're all sharing together. I'm going to ask you, Nkem, if you could close us out with a connecting practice that people can take away with them.
So just right now, drop in and notice where this conversation has stirred in you. Where is there a little sense of more aliveness? Right? Maybe it's bubbly, right? Maybe it's kind of pushing, right? Like trying to burst forth. Maybe it's expansive. And notice the part of you inside that might be a little scared to allow that to be there, that's trying to maybe hold it back a little bit. Don't get ahead of yourself. And not to make that bad or wrong. Notice that that's part of your experience too. Maybe there's a conversation between these parts. The part that wants to burst forth, the part that wants to bubble up, the part that wants to expand, and the part that wants to hold back. Can they be in conversation with each other? Can you feel perhaps the tension? But again, not making it wrong or bad. Can you be big enough to hold both? to let yourself lean into the excitement, lean into the future, without leaving any part of yourself behind. And if it feels supportive, to notice your breath and maybe let it lengthen that exhale a little bit. To anchor that little seed that's ready to birth forth. Thank you so much. Rebekah?
Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to send deep gratitude to our panel tonight, to Temi, to Alex, to Nkem, and to Melz. Also to Grace and Rachel, our BSL interpreters. Thank you for working so hard during this time. And for Bella and Arif and Sarah, who've been doing tech and holding us through this. We're going to finish slightly early to give everyone a bit of time in case they're able tonight to join our breath circle. Arif, if you could put the slide up. We just wanted to share some aftercare resources that we have that are accessible to everyone. So if you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter that will tell us about future events that are going on. And particularly the event that I mentioned in a few weeks, which will be on disability justice and somatics. We have regular support spaces that we offer each week, so please look on the Healing Justice website to see what those are, and we're able to join them. And also I put the link to Luminous Transform's website as well, that they also offer individual support and group classes. And then tonight, if you're able, Fazana Khan from Healing Justice is holding our weekly breath circle. Although it's a breath circle, it's actually a mixture of different short, accessible practices. So it's tonight at 9:30, and the link is there if you want to register through Eventbrite. So just to give my deep gratitude to everyone for coming again today. Lots of love and care to everyone. Take care. Thank you.